Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump has approved an emergency declaration for Washington that will last through January 24th. This comes after the FBI warned of more armed demonstrations by Trump protesters ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration. Meanwhile, Democrats have tabled a resolution in the House of Representatives asking Vice President Mike Pence to remove Trump over Capitol riots. Leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia have signed a pact to develop economic links and transport infrastructure. The decision came in the first meeting between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the Nagorno-Karabakh war. Hosting the meeting in Moscow, Russian President Putin said the ceasefire is being implemented successfully in the region. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu is arriving in Pakistan today on a three-day official visit. Pakistan's Foreign Office says Cavusoglu will call on President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan. He will also hold bilateral talks with his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. At least 22 workers are trapped under rubble after a gold mine explosion in China's eastern Shandong province. Authorities say rescue workers have been dispatched to the site, but have so far been unable to contact the trapped miners. The number of COVID-19 deaths in the United Kingdom has crossed 82,000 with over 3.1 million infections. Deaths in the U.S. have topped 376,000 as its caseload exceeds 22.6 million. In Pakistan, 2,400 new cases and 41 fatalities were reported overnight, with the death toll crossing 10,700. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.94 million lives and infected over 90.6 million people. And in tennis, American Christian Harrison continues his dream run in Delray Beach Open with another win, this time over Gianluca Majere. World number 789 beat the Italian 7-6, 6-4 to advance to his first ATP Tour semifinals. In the semis, Harrison will meet Polish Hubert Hurkacz, who saw off Ecuadorian Roberto Quiroz 6-4, 6-4 in the quarterfinal. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. And starting off in the United States, U.S. President Donald Trump has approved an emergency declaration for Washington that will last through January 24th. This comes after the FBI warned of more armed demonstrations by Trump protesters ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration. More in this report.
Extraordinary and unprecedented actions are unfolding as the U.S. gears up to protect the American democracy, not from a foreign terrorist threat, but from Americans themselves. Following the storming of Capitol Hill that cost 5 lives, including a policeman, President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration ceremony on January 20 has been scaled back dramatically, with 15,000 National Guard troops set to secure the event. Washington, D.C. is on a high alert after the FBI warned of more armed protest on the day.
I sent a letter yesterday requesting that the president declare a pre-emergency disaster for the District of Columbia. D.C. Requested and was granted this designation in 2009 to support the inauguration of President Barack Obama. This is necessary because the inauguration poses several unprecedented challenges that exceed the scope of our traditional planning processes.
Tourists have been barred from visiting the Washington Monument due to threats of more violence from Trump supporters. But speaking in Delaware, Biden said he's unfazed by the threats.
I'm not afraid of taking the oath outside, and we've been getting briefed, but I think it's critically important that there be a real serious focus on holding those folks who engage in sedition and threaten people's lives, deface public property, cause great damage, that they be held accountable. And I think that's a view that is held by the vast majority of Democrats and Republicans in the Congress.
Meanwhile, the House Democrats plan to vote tomorrow to impeach President Donald Trump just 7 days before the end of his term. They have already tabled a resolution asking Vice President Mike Pence to remove Trump over last week's riots.
Moving on, leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia have signed a pact to develop economic links and transport infrastructure. The decision came in the first meeting between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the Nagorno-Karabakh war. Hosting the meeting in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the ceasefire is being implemented successfully in the region. Putin brought the Armenian and Azeri leaders together to help them resolve problems that risk undermining the truce. The Russian president said that both the countries have agreed on a joint declaration to develop the region. The ceasefire agreement halted the 6-week conflict between Azeri and ethnic Armenian forces, locking in territorial gains for Azerbaijan. Now, Turkey and Greece will resume talks over territorial claims in the eastern Mediterranean Sea this month. In a statement, the Turkish Foreign Ministry said the 61st round of negotiations will take place in Istanbul on January 25th. The Greek Foreign Ministry confirmed the date and location in a statement, but provided no further details. Greece rejected talks planned for last year after Turkey deployed a seismic exploration vessel to disputed waters, but the Oruç Reis vessel has since moved to Turkish shores. Ankara and Athens are at odds over continental shelves in the Mediterranean, offshore energy rights, airspace, and the status of some islands. And Qatar says it is ready to mediate talks between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. In a statement, Qatari Foreign Ministry Special Envoy Mutlaq al-Qahtani said the friendly ties between the two states is in everyone's interests. He said Qatar will mediate if the two sides are willing to accept it as a mediator. But he said this is due to the principle of consent as a basic principle in international relations. Earlier, a plane of Saudi Airlines landed in Qatar for the first time in over 3 years. Qatar recently signed a deal with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt, which ended 3 years of air, land, and sea blockade on Doha. Now, Palestine says it is ready to work with the 4 countries of the Munich group to revive the stalled peace process with Israel. Fatah spokesperson Mahmoud al-Alul indicated Palestinian leadership's willingness to work with Egypt, Jordan, France, and Germany. He said restoring matters to normal depends on establishing an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Earlier, the foreign ministers of the Munich group met in Egypt to discuss a peace process between Palestine and Israel. Meanwhile, Palestine has strongly condemned Israel's decision to build more 800 settlement units in the West Bank. Now in China, at least 22 workers are trapped under rubble after a gold mine explosion in eastern Shandong province. Chinese authorities say officials are trying to rescue the survivors. The rescuers have so far been unable to contact the trapped miners as the blast damaged the communication signal system. State media says the mine was owned by Shandong Wuseilong Investment Company. Earlier in December, at least 18 people died after being trapped in a mine in the southwestern city of Chongqing. Moving on to India, another elderly farmer protesting against the centre's 3 farm laws has died of cardiac arrest at the Delhi border protest. So far, over 50 farmers have died of cold or illnesses while protesting against Prime Minister Narendra Modi's controversial laws. The farmer, identified as Avtar Singh, had stayed put from day one at the border to protest against the farm laws. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is set to deliver its judgment on a batch of petitions challenging the laws that were enacted last September. The centre and farmer unions have engaged in 8 rounds of talks so far, but failed to break the impasse. Their next meeting is scheduled for January 15th. And Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu is arriving in Pakistan today on a 3-day official visit. This will be the Turkish top diplomat's 3rd visit during the last 2.5 years. Pakistan's foreign ministry says during his visit, Cavusoglu will call on President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan. He will also hold bilateral talks with his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. The foreign ministry says Cavusoglu's visit to Pakistan is part of regular high-level exchanges between the two countries. It adds the visit will help further deepen the bilateral ties and enhance cooperation in multiple areas. And the UK has reported more than 82,000 deaths and 3.1 million cases since the coronavirus pandemic began. The U.S. remains the worst hit with over 376,000 fatalities and 22.5 million infections. Globally, the virus has infected 90 million people and claimed 1.94 million lives. More on the latest in the pandemic in the following report.
With over a year past, the world is still at wit's end on not just the origin of COVID-19, but also on how to contain it. As the virus ravages America, the US-based biotechnology company Moderna says its vaccine can protect people for only a year. Experts have sounded further alarm after at least 2 gorillas at a zoo in San Diego tested positive. And a situation of near chaos reigns as state governments call each other's vaccine strategies flawed.
As relates to vaccinations as well, we recognize that the current strategy is not going to get us to where we need to go as quickly as we all need to go. And so that's why we're speeding up the administration, not just for priority groups, but also now opening up large sites to do so.
Over in Europe, critics are blaming the relaxation of curbs over the holidays after Ireland reported the highest possible COVID-19 infection rate in the world. The UK's National Health Service says a quarter of the coronavirus admissions to hospitals are people under the age of 55. Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa has also tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned that despite vaccine drives, herd immunity cannot be achieved in 2021. It says the start of vaccination in the developing world by February depends on the suppliers.
Require the cooperation of vaccine manufacturers to prioritize deliveries to the COVAX facility. We require the cooperation of our financiers to see through the financing necessary, and we require the cooperation, as Dr. Tedros said, of those key suppliers to make sure that we have the necessary data to ensure these vaccines meet all of the criteria necessary in terms of efficacy, safety, and quality.
Japan is set to extend the state of emergency for 3 more prefectures to stem the spread of coronavirus. Meanwhile, a study in China has found that most COVID-19 patients are still suffering from symptoms 6 months after infection.
Whereas in Pakistan, 41 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This pushes the country's death toll to 10,717. Health officials reported 2,408 new infections overnight. Meanwhile, there are more than 34,000 active cases in the country. The health ministry says out of over 506,000 countrywide cases, more than 461,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, the first batch of COVID-19 vaccines from China's Sinopharm will arrive in Pakistan by the first week of February. Special advisor to the Prime Minister, Dr. Faisal Sultan, says it will include 1.1 million doses for about 500,000 people. Now, Pakistan has launched a 5-day vaccination campaign against polio amid tight security. The drive is aimed at eradicating the children's disease in 2021. Zulfikar Babakhil, a spokesman for the anti-polio program, said workers will try to vaccinate 40 million children across Pakistan. He said polio workers will follow social distancing measures and other precautions due to the coronavirus. The previous campaign took place in August last year during a brief decline in fatalities and infections from the coronavirus. And we'll be back with more news in detail after a short break. Stick around. We're back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dropped U.S. President Donald Trump from the banner photo of his Twitter account. The move comes as amid an apparent break with a political ally facing possible impeachment. Now, Netanyahu's new picture showing him being injected with the coronavirus vaccine tops the page. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department's website mistakenly ended early the terms of President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence. The bio pages for both Trump and Pence on the State Department site said that their respective terms ended on January 11th. Pence's page was quickly fixed and Trump's page was being worked on. Trump and Pence will leave office on January 20th. And scientists with machetes and calipers have taken to the Brazilian Amazon. But the only war they are fighting is against climate change. More in this report.
The machete-wielding scientist ventured into the Amazon, hacking through the dense jungle as the mid-morning temperature soared past 38 centigrade. Soaked in sweat, the small group of men and women sawed and tore trees limb from limb. They drilled into the soil and sprayed paint across tree trunks. This is vandalism in the name of science, part of an effort to measure more precisely how much greenhouse gas is absorbed by different types of forest in the Amazon basin.
Nós estamos perdendo áreas de floresta no mundo.
We are losing areas of forests in the world. We need to know the role that the forests play, if it is a positive one in capturing carbon, or if it is negative by emitting greenhouse gases. Every time there is deforestation, there is an emission of greenhouse gases. Tropical forests are among the highest emitters of greenhouse gases affecting climate change. This work is important to quantify this, to have real data.
Carbon dioxide is the most prevalent of the greenhouse gases which lock heat into the Earth's atmosphere. Trees soak up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it as carbon, one of the cheapest and easiest ways to curb emissions.
The environmental ecosystem has no borders. What happens here has a greater impact on global society. That is why working to conserve the Amazon affects global society.
Deforestation in the Amazon has accelerated during the administration of Jair Bolsonaro, the right-wing president of Brazil. Since he took office in 2019, at least 825 million tons of carbon dioxide have been released from the Brazilian Amazon. That is more than emitted by all U.S. passenger cars in a year.
Twitter says it has suspended over 70,000 accounts dedicated to sharing QAnon content. This follows the Capitol Hill riots by armed pro-Trump protesters last week. In a blog, Twitter said the accounts were engaged in harmful QAnon-associated content at scale. It said they were primarily dedicated to the propagation of the conspiracy theory. QAnon backers have pushed conspiracies on social media, including a baseless claim that Trump is secretly fighting pedophiles in government, business, and the media. Supporters of the QAnon movement were among the crowd that stormed the U.S. Capitol building. Moving on to business, stocks in Asia Pacific are trading mixed after shares on Wall Street lost steam and pulled back from all-time highs. South Korean stocks have taken the hardest hit, plunging over 2% on the heels of gains. Shares in Australia, too, have dipped, with the ASX 200 shedding marginally. But mainland Chinese shares have gained over 1%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng has added over 0.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index have also edged up. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.